Welcome into War Chant TV. This is Ira Schofel, and I'm joined by a friend of mine, but a great friend of Florida State University and FSU athletics, Didier Occident, who I guess by day is a financial planner, a financial advisor. But one of the things he also does, one of the ways he gives back to young people, is he does a lot of help with FSU Seminole athletes in terms of, particularly the football team, in terms of giving them advice on life skills, financial planning, and then also more recently with the events of today, with the fight for racial equality and racial justice and an end to racism. He's been kind of talking to some FSU athletes about what's going on and how to use their platform and how to kind of push for change. And so I wanted to welcome in Didier. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Great to be with you guys.
So I wanted to start off talking about some of the things you've done in the past, some of the ways you've helped some of these young athletes and kind of preparing for their future, especially after football, and maybe if they make professional football, how to kind of deal with some of the issues they're going to face there. But then also kind of touch on what's happening today, and then maybe look at what's down the road, some of the opportunities down the road. So how did you first get involved? I know you've been working with FSU athletes for a while. How did that come about, and what could you talk about some of your program and some of the things you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long road to get it done. I think the idea started, so I've been a financial advisor for 11 years now, and my company's Occident Wealth Management, which is affiliated with Northwestern Mutual. And my dream when I first started was to go to, be in a position where I live in Virginia, to be able to go to 3 Florida State football games a year. And I put in the work and had a lot of success early on. And, I remember my wife and I going down and tailgating and not knowing anybody down there early on in my career. And I got to go to a few games. You get to know some people. And really this started when I got to know, if you remember, Juco Genajay, who played from 06 to 2010. We became friends. He worked at FSU for a few years after, and he is now director of player development at North Carolina. But he became a friend and client of mine, and he thought that I made finances seem, I explained it easily, made it easy to digest, and he had the idea of what you should talk to the guys. And we had a conversation about it. He introduced me to Mark Robinson, who was the director
operations
of football ops under Jimbo. And Mark and I have emails going back to the first week after we won the national championship game about trying to set this up and figure it out. And for whatever reason, it would keep falling through the cracks. And eventually we had set a time, I think, and for the off season. And then Jimbo, happened to be the year Jimbo left. So I was like, oh, I'm back to square one. But, as I met people and got to know players and people inside the athletic department, there's always holdovers. And one of the biggest advocates that I had was Mario Edwards, who stayed on. And I was going down to Tampa and had to go to FSU I was down in Tampa for an event that I was planning. And Mario said, hey, why don't you come shoot through Tallahassee on your way back, and I'll introduce you to some of the new staff. And he introduced me to Trey Hackett, who was on the old staff, player development. And it turned out to be a blessing, because what we talked about, and as we started talking about ideas, we were like, we could turn this into a full-blown program, right? Financial literacy program. So I went in the lab and got with my team, and we created, we had the first session about 2 years ago, actually in June this month, with the guys, and we just work on life skills, the basics of a financial plan, budgeting. And one of the biggest things for me is helping them understand where they are now, right? So the NCAA is not perfect. We all know that. We all know these guys aren't getting their fair value for what they bring in the university. But on the other side, the NCAA has made strides, right? And I think people would be surprised to know how much they actually do get. So I want the kids to know, hey, while you are not getting, it's not completely equitable. If someone's constantly telling you what you don't get, you're not going to do anything with what you actually do get, right? So I help them in a real world way understand what they get in terms of stipends, and because they get it in a lot of different ways, and it's hard to track, but I want them to view themselves as employees who make this much, right? So we assign a dollar value to it, and then we walk through how can you create the habits today to live your best future tomorrow. That's my big motto, creating the habits now, because if you can't manage $1,000, you can't manage $1 million.
Well,
So the main thing is making them understand where they are now.
Yeah, it's a great situation. I guess a great opportunity for a lot of these kids, because I can just speak as a non-athlete. Financial planning is something a lot of us don't know anything about. We go to college, we maybe get a job, and we get what we get and we spend it. And unless we've had somebody to kind of guide us. But I remember Terrell Buckley, who used to coach at Florida State, and back when before he started got into coaching, he helped create like a life skills program, and it was basic things as much as just setting up checking accounts and how to balance a checkbook and those types of things. Are you starting at kind of that ground zero, or kind of where do you go?
Absolutely. So we start with just the basics of setting up a budget. So for me, planning is all dependent on how do you set up a budget, how do you set that up for success. What are the steps? How much should you be spending on living expenses, car, car, housing, how much for discretionary, and then the concept of paying themselves first. So these guys understanding, all right, everything that you get, you want to treat your savings like a bill. You want to say, all right, I'm going to take this amount out, just like I got to pay my car, just like I got to pay my house. I'm going to take this amount out every month and put it to the side. For what we're trying to do, it's the basics. It's understanding all these other, until we get the basics down, we're not able to get to the next layer of where we need to get to with it. So it's about establishing a budget and creating the habits today that are going to help you going forward, and understanding, all right, what percentage you need to put in savings, how much should you put towards a car, what's the max. So it's walking through all that. We do it in a fun, interactive way, right? So I remember when I was 18, 19 years old, this stuff is boring at any age, right? But especially when you're right, it's not fun. No one loves to talk about this. Many people don't love to talk about it. But what we try to do is meet them where they are, help them understand where they are, and discuss it in an engaging way. And the kids have really taken a liking to it.
It's totally voluntary, right? Like you don't know which players are going to come or not. It's basically whether or not they want to come. They're not required to come to this, right?
Yeah, no. So we try to make most of it voluntary to different levels. So we'll do a team talk where it's fit into the schedule where the whole team will come. But beyond that, it's all voluntary, right? And so much of what we try to do is align action with intention, right? No one intends to be bad with money. But how do we get from aligning what you want to do with what you're actually doing? So I was overwhelmed by the amount of guys who individually reached out and said, hey, I'd like to know more about investing. How do you help me set up a budget, right? Because the idea is so often that athletes are just terrible with money and these guys are irresponsible. But really what you find is that they're no worse in money than the average person. So that's another thing that I tell them. They just make the same mistakes as everyone else with a lot more money.
On a bigger scale.
Right? So on a bigger scale. And when diving into it and working with athletes, understanding how they're paid, I almost am shocked more don't make those mistakes, because they get, for footballers, for example, you get paid just over the course of a season, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I have clients anyone who's out there who's been paid once a month struggles with that, as opposed to being paid every 2 weeks. Now imagine getting $1 million over a 4.5, 5 month span, and then having the budget for the rest of the year at 22, 23 years old. So the big thing for me is helping them understand, hey, this is not an athlete problem. This is a societal problem, right? And we have to create, it all starts with the habits that we create today.
And I could ask you, there's a million things I could ask you about, because on this topic, because for years I've seen, a lot of athletes come through college sports and then go on to professional sports. And it seems like almost like when these guys do make it to the NFL or the NBA, whatever sport, it's almost like they become a target for so many people who are trying to kind of get their hands in their pockets. So I think what you're doing is really helpful, and giving those guys just kind of a starting point, in their careers. but more recently, you've I guess through your relationships with FSU's football players, in the time that we're going through right now, and the racial crisis, I guess you'd say, that's kind of hit the country over the last couple of weeks, or at least bubbled up. It's probably always been there, but now it's kind of up to the surface. I know you've talked with Jaden Lars-Woodby a lot through his. He put out a statement this week and a video. How have those conversations gone? What have you seen from some of the players you've talked to during this situation?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've always been there. I'm passionate about the work that I do in this sense. I'm passionate about college athletics, and I'm passionate about civil rights and social justice. So it's great that these things are coming together, and we have a lot of conversations about it. You know, I remember the first session that we did. I had a student ask me, or one of the players asked me, we were talking about credit, and one of the players said, "Hey, I heard that black people have worse credit than white people. Is that true?" Like, it was an inherent thing that just was.
Yeah.
And I said, that's a complex conversation for this session, but because I said there's a lot that plays into that. I said, it's not determined by your race, but a lot of times, I was like, I think what you're hinting at is there's a lot of systemic things that will lead African Americans by and large to have worse credits than white people, but it's not inherently like that. So naturally, when you get into money, you get into where these kids are from, what opportunities they have or what they don't have, or how they view the world. And Jaden in particular has shown, you know, and if anyone follows him on social media, he has been talking about this stuff long ago, from the time he's gotten on campus. So Jaden and I have these conversations all the time, and I always joke with him, he's like the son my dad always wanted, right? I wish I was like Jaden. I wish when I was younger, I was like Jaden is. So I love working with him because he is so young and has he is on a mission to make the world a better place and to better himself in everything that he does. So when this happened, you know, we had been discussing some other things, and it's funny, I let him borrow a book of mine about activism a few months ago that he was just interested in, and he wanted to say something, and you know, how do you formulate the right message, right? It's like, he's so passionate about it. He tweets about it all the time. He talks about it. He has it's like, I liken it to being a singer in like a dive bar. You're a great singer all the time, and you're singing for anyone. You're like, man, I'm the best singer. If I ever get the chance, I'll blow them away. And then something happens, and they're like, oh, you got to sing for Beyonce in 10 minutes. And you're like, well, what do I do, right? So I liken it to that, because Jaden was struggling on how exactly, he's so involved and felt, I have to say something. So I just started saying, all right, listen, one of my biggest things is 7 habits of highly effective people. One of them is begin with the end in mind. So what at the end of this, what do we want, right? And he's like, societal change, right? And he's like, I just want Florida State fans to know this isn't an us versus you. We're all in this together, but this needs to stop. So then I said, that's what you say, right? That's what you say. And then it's, you know, fine tuning his thoughts into something that everyone can rally around. And he said, I want to make it a video because words on paper are hollow. And then he wanted to make it have action behind it. So I'm so proud of him. I'm proud of the way he uses his platform. I'm proud of the way these guys use their platform. And I'm excited about the work ahead.
Like you said, I mean, Jaden's a guy, I think he's gone on mission trips to help people. He's got a purpose beyond football. I mean, that's obvious, and I don't know him well, but you can just see from social media. And I think when all this kind of really hit right after Mr. Floyd's death or killing, he posted something on Twitter along the lines of, and first of all, let me, real quick, for people who want to follow you on social media, you want to give out your social media accounts?
Yeah. So Twitter, it's at my first and last name. It's at DIDIER. Occident. So at Didier Occident. And Instagram is at Didier Occident 32. And then we have an Occident Wealth Management Instagram page. And then we have a Secure the Bag Twitter that I just started. And we have, I think my brother follows me, and that's it. We haven't used it. So
I'll jump on.
And I think it's at Secure the Bag or STB program for Twitter.
Great. And that's because Secure the Bag is the name of the program you do with the.
Yeah, it's the name of the literacy program. Yep.
So yeah, Jaden tweeted at the time, that he wished student athletes could say what they want to say, something along those lines. And a lot of people went back at him and said, hey man, speak up, say what you want to say. And it's, as somebody who's covered college athletics for a long time, I've never been a college athlete, but I've covered it and I know what they go through. That's kind of the opposite of kind of how teams traditionally have worked. It's usually been seen as, the athletes, and this isn't just on the college level. A lot of times athletes are discouraged, even implicitly. I don't know if it's always overtly, but encouraged to not do anything that's going to become a distraction to the team. Don't do anything that's going to take away from the team. So that leads to a culture where, and different coaches have led to, social media bans and things like that. But the reality is that's not, whether it's social media or not, it's just kind of been understood that you're not supposed to create a problem, create divisiveness, create negative attention. But that seems like it's completely done a 180 here because of this situation. But those guys are going to need help, I would assume, walking through that. Because it's so different.
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think for so long, and this is something privately, I talk to friends and my little brother's one of my close friends, and we have this discussion all the time, is it always has bothered me that athletes can't use their platform and say the things that they want to say, right? It's like there's this, and we see it a lot with African Americans in every walk of life, right? And once you reach a certain level, the deal you make is to keep moving forward, you have to say less, right? And I don't think there's any form of a group of people as African Americans by and large that have more power than athletes, right? They're, especially we're talking about the NBA, the NFL, college football, they are the talent, right? So they cannot be replaced. They are the talent pool, right? So you have situations where in corporate America, they're going to find somebody else to do the spreadsheets, right? If you talk it out, they can't, there's not someone else who's going to run a 4.340. So the view that talking about racism is racist or divisive, and you have the deal that a lot of these athletes feel like they have to make is, all right, I've got to protect my brand. If I want to go to the next level, I got to shut up and dribble, that type of thing. And the NFL players feel it, obviously. They're making millions of dollars. So how does a college athlete feel, right? Because they haven't even gotten there. So one of the concerns is, all right, how do you navigate this? And that's why I'm so encouraged, because I've never seen change happen this rapidly on something. And it is almost like that is out the window, and they've kind of realized the power that they have, right? And they're from neighborhoods. I was talking about this with someone the other day. They're from areas where there's schools that are pipelines for athletes, right? And you've got 30, 40 years of athletes and a bunch of Hall of Famers that came through that school, went to college, went to the NFL. They're Hall of Famers, but yet the school and the neighborhood's still the same, right? And it's like, some of these schools in Miami or wherever, where it's like something has to change, because the deal seems to be you go through these pipeline and then the next kid comes right behind you. And what we want is for eventually that next kid to not have to go through that same situation, through that same pipeline. And I think it's like Jaden said in the statement, there's kids that are 5 minutes from the stadium who can't even afford to get in to play. And then the fortunate ones who make it out of their situation, right? You see it all the time with athletes. So they make it out of the situation, and then they'll suit up for Florida State, right? And there's a bunch of kids who won't make it, or because of their circumstance and socioeconomic things that won't make it, and then the next kid comes right behind them, and it's like these kids are 5 minutes away and don't have the opportunity or the access to see these guys play and make it out of their situation. So something has to change. It starts with education, and it starts with these guys collectively moving that forward. And I think what we want is there's that facilities arm race that we have, right? There's the arms race of get your water slide in, or your golf course, or your whatever. And it's like, hopefully the new arms race is how can we move progress ahead for the communities that a lot of these kids come from.
One of the things I thought that was really powerful in Jaden's comment was that he didn't, as you said, there was a kind of a call for action, and he was also asking, the fan base for help, which I thought was a nice message, and I think it resonated with people. This isn't, you can ask for help, or you can call for change in a lot of different ways, but I thought that was a smart way on his behalf of, letting people know, hey, I can't do this. I can't do this alone. We can't do this alone. We need you to help. How did that message? Where do you think that came from him?
His desire. So and because we know each other so well, he can just kind of speak, right? And then I'm like, this is what you said, and this is what you said. How do you think you can bring these together, right? So he says, I don't want a vanilla watered down statement that doesn't speak to the urgency of the issue. But at the same time, I don't want to offend anybody, right? I love Florida State. We have awesome fans. I just wish we could bring them together. And then it's like the light bulb goes off. Ask them for help, right? So we want to make you want to make the statement as bulletproof as possible, where if somebody doesn't like it, they're really telling on themselves, right? If somebody doesn't like that statement, you're really telling on yourself, right? So for him, it was, I love it. I don't want to alienate anybody, and then so his approach was, all right, well, if I can approach this, we're all in this together. There's nothing like Doak in the fall. I love Doak. I'm going to ask them for help, and I'm going to ask them to join this fight with me, right? And who can argue with that? Who can argue with, because this is what you hear all the time. I don't necessarily disagree with the message. I disagree with the method, right? So if you don't disagree with the message, here's the method, and this isn't just a virtue signal. These are steps that these are steps and things that you can execute to help us on this mission. And I want everyone involved in this.
Well, as you said, it's words without action don't mean a whole lot. So what do you think is going to happen now? There's been times in our society, and there's been times in athletics where there's been an issue that's kind of come up, and then it kind of falls back into the back. What do you expect this new activism from student athletes? Where do you think that might be heading, and in what ways do you think Jaden or any of his teammates might look to put work to these words?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think, to your point, I think one of the things that I do with the literacy program, I think one of the things that is preached to football players, right? I love Coach Norvell's whole mantra of habits and 1% better every day, right? Because you can apply that will make you the best football player you can be. It will also make you the best human being you can be. So I think the idea is if we can get 1% better on this issue every single day and be active participants in fighting it, it's going to get better, right? And I think for the players, it's about, I think that Jaden said in his statement, sharing resources and leading the way by saying, hey, putting in the time and doing the work, saying, hey, this is a book you can read. This is an article you can read. Here's organizations. I know one thing that's already been talked about before this is, and I'm going to be on the board for Jameis Winston's Dream Forever Foundation that's going to be in Tallahassee. That was supposed to kick off in April, but COVID had other plans. So I think it's been moved to October, and that was something that they were already, I think, partnering or talking with FSU about partnering on. So I think a lot of this, as Jaden said, starts with education. I think that is one area, with Jameis moving that Dream Forever for equal access education to Tallahassee would be one thing. And then I know the team, we saw in Marvin's statement, they're all going to register to vote.
Yeah.
I think they're awakening to not only the issues, but the power that they have. And they're committed to kind of walking the walk. And I think it starts with the coaches. Coach Novell, I chatted with him through text a little bit kind of about some of this stuff, and he is all on board for change and doing the work to get us where we need to go. And you can see that from coaches. I mean, I've seen some coaches the past week, and I know you have too, where some of the statements and some of the actions have been eye-opening.
Yeah.
And I think once you get past the statement into action, we can't go back. We can't go back. There's a long road ahead. There's a graphic that I saw from the New Yorker where it has, you may have seen this, Black person and a white person going up a mountain, and it's like George Floyd killing, and the white person's bent over holding it because it took them so long to get there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the Black person points to the rest of the mountain and says, "We have a long way to go.
Yeah,
we have a long way to go." And I think collectively, in my lifetime, I've never seen the nation as ready to have these conversations, and we just have to continue to move it forward and progress it every day, get 1% better.
Well, thanks a lot for taking some time to talk to us. And again, if people who aren't familiar with Didier, you can follow him on Twitter. If you want to give again your social media accounts. Yeah,
so it's at Didier Occident, my first and last name. So DIDIER OCCIDENT. And then at Secure the Bag. We just started that. So again, my brother, I think, is the only one following us. And then my Instagram is at Didier Occident 32. So at first and last 32.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks a lot, Brad.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And maybe we'll have you on at some point down the road to kind of talk about where things have gone, and appreciate all you do. Again, like I said, for these student athletes and people, financial advice is something every single one of us could use and can use early as possible in our lives. So I appreciate what you're doing. Thanks a lot. And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate it.